But now, though, more on news that the government has announced that a deposit return scheme for single-use bottles will be introduced in England. The Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, has praised the role of Sky's Ocean Rescue campaign in the battle to cut down on plastics. Joining us now is Amy Mount, who is head of the Greener UK unit at the Green Alliance, and James Woudhuysen, who is a professor of forecasting and innovation at the London South Bank University. Hello to you both. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Let's, ladies first, of course. Hello to you, Amy. It's all well and good, but it's going to cost millions, isn't it?
Well, it's a deposit return scheme, so the scheme is all about putting a small extra charge onto bottles when you buy them, and then consumers are incentivised to return those bottles back for recycling to then make sure that we're keeping those very valuable, precious materials in circulation, and we're not throwing them away and not letting them end up in the oceans with the sort of devastating impacts on marine life that programmes such as Blue Planet have demonstrated so recently.
OK, so there we are then, James. It's a brilliant idea, and it's going to save our oceans.
Well, I wish it would, but if you look at the actual plastics coming out of the Thames, for example, you'll find it's 1.4 kilos with 3 noughts at the end of it. It's 18,000 kilos, 18,000 kilos, and you compare that with the worldwide figure for oceans, how many kilos they weigh. It's 1.4 kilos with 21 noughts at the end of it. So it's quite clear that this is purely an attempt by Michael Gove and the government to distract from their chaos, to make you and I feel guilty every time we go into the supermarket, to make us faff around a whole lot more, finding the deposit slip, taking the bottles back, and all of that. It's really the new climate change for a new year, and I think it is just about changing our lifestyles and making the government look good than actually using technology to deal with such problems with the oceans that we have. They're not caused in Britain. They're much more caused in the Yangtze or the Ganges or the Indus or the Mekong Delta. And we could use robots on beaches, in countryside, on our streets to pick up all the plastics and litter that too many people drop.
OK. Amy, it's a waste of time.
No, I mean, plastic drinks containers are the largest single source of marine litter entering the seas from the UK. So it's really important that we address this.
But we're not doing anything.
This scheme
we're only putting out 18 tonnes from the Thames.
It's a really considerable amount of plastic pollution, and why should we be putting any litter into the oceans? These should be pristine environments. They're very special places. And the other important thing about it is not just the volume of recycling.
Hold on a second. Amy, go on.
Thank you. It's not just the volume of litter that we're reducing and that we're increasing recycling. It's also the quality of the materials that you're getting back from this. So with current recycling methods, you often find that the materials are getting contaminated, different types of materials mixing in together, which makes them much lower value products. And actually, recyclers in the UK have really struggled with the economics of that. So having separation at source, as this scheme suggests, would make it a much more economically efficient process.
The professor's raising his eyebrows at that. Professor?
Well, you still haven't answered the basic point, which is that we are not putting out very much plastics. 18 tonnes from the Thames sounds like a lot. Compared with the oceans, we've got nothing to feel guilty about. I think it's very convenient for the government, for the Green Alliance, which is funded by Shell and BP, among others, to jump on this issue because popular support for really doing something about climate change has faded a bit. So now we've got a new bandwagon to get along with. And what have you got to say about using mechanised techniques to deal with the rubbish that does end in the oceans? There's a fantastic plastic sieve that's been developed in the Netherlands, made out of plastics, this horrible material, we're all told, and it will remove a whole lot of the plastics from our oceans. That's downstream. Upstream, there are also many technological possibilities, and it's that we should be considering. Otherwise, we'll be in what Greens too often want, a whole labour-intensive regime where consumers feel bad and they run around and they turn their mobile chargers off and they sort their rubbish into 4 bins, I believe, if the European Union has jurisdiction over households in the way that it would like. And this is, distracting from the major issues, which is that local authorities don't have money to collect rubbish. They tend to mix it up, and they would much rather assign the blame to us than to themselves or Whitehall.
Wow, Amy, a lot for you to do to get your teeth in there. Where do you want to start?
Look, this is not a trivial issue. Plastic pollution, as the public knows and cares about, is a serious issue, as is climate change. And it's vital that the UK, as an environmental leader, take action, show what real leadership looks like at home, and works internationally. I agree that it's important to address these issues internationally as well, and we should be using our diplomatic resources and so forth to make sure that progress is not just here, it's around the world. But the government is doing the right thing with this scheme if it follows through, if it makes sure that it's really well designed, and that's going to be crucial. We need to make sure it's not voluntary. We need to make sure that it applies to all bottle containers, so not just small ones, for example, but absolutely everything. We've seen with the plastic bag tax that while Scotland introduced that sort of comprehensively on all plastic bags and had a massive impact, in England it started off just on the large retailers, and then greater ambition had to be retrofitted at a later date. We don't want to be doing that with bottles. We need to be starting out right from the beginning with a very ambitious policy that's going to tackle this really serious issue. And importantly as well, it needs to be a UK-wide approach. So the UK government needs to be working with the devolved administrations to make sure that this problem is tackled across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in a coordinated approach, so that you don't have the extra costs on businesses and consumers that would be created if you had to have separate labels in England compared to the separate labels in Scotland if you've got separate schemes going on.
OK, Professor?
Well, you're making it sound what it is, which is extremely complicated. And, we'll have to check the labels, check the kind of bottles, check the receptacles, make sure that a tiny little corner store or a mom and pop shop has a recycling machine inside the shop, or if there isn't space, then outside the shop. It's terrific. But what you're not considering is any serious technological solutions downstream. You're not addressing the point that we're putting out very little plastics. And to say that Britain is an environmental leader is a complete joke, right? We're well known to be, with the exception of plastics in the Thames, where we're quite clean, one of the dirtiest countries in Europe and around the world. And, it flatters our national self-esteem, and no doubt some of your friends in Westminster say that we're environmental leaders. When we go over to nuclear power properly, instead of always worrying about it so much, then we could be properly deemed a low-carbon economy. But that's not what's on offer. Instead, it's all located at the level of the household, policing us. When Michael Gove told us that we needed a change of attitudes and behaviour, I think that's what we need much more in terms of government ambition, rather than you and me having to scrabble around in our waste bins, finding out whether we've done the right thing and been morally correct.
OK, Amy, it's just too complicated. It's too complicated. We're not going to do it. It's a waste of money, waste of time.
It's absolutely not. It's actually about creating incentives for consumers to be able to do the right thing without having to agonise about what the right things to do. So you get the policy right and you say, look, all you have to do is bring your bottle back and you'll get the money for it. If you don't want to bring your bottle back, that's your problem. You miss out on the benefit. I think I'm not at all against technological solutions. I think technology has a very important role to play, both in decarbonisation and in reducing our resource use and eliminating waste. But it's not just the downstream, actually, end of the spectrum that we should be looking at here. We need to be looking upstream too. So a really comprehensive approach to waste and resources would be to look at reducing the amount of plastic that we use to start with. So, for example, having universal access to public water fountains would mean that people wouldn't need to buy single-use plastic bottles in order to get a drink. You can have your reusable bottle and you can go and fill it up wherever you like. So it's those sorts of solutions as well that the government should be looking at. And in the forthcoming resources and waste strategy that we're expecting later this year, I hope solutions like that will be included.
OK. We started with you, Amy, so final word to the Professor?
Well, it's important to try to build bridges, and I'm all in favour of public water fountains. If I had more confidence in Thames Water's ability to stem leaks and not to be fined every other year or month for its poor sewage systems and all the rest of it, you know, I'd be 100% behind it. So, you know, that's a solution. But what I'm trying to say is that there are bigger issues at stake and less guilt to be had around Britain's reputed pollution of the oceans. We're hardly doing any of it, and this kind of measure is not going to solve it. We need, as I've said, we need robots on our streets to clear stuff away. We need robots on our beaches and in the countryside. Everybody talks about robots, and nobody's prepared to put that kind of measure through. I'm sure, Amy, at least we can agree on that as well.
OK, good to talk to both of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other news: for detectives have arrested a 57-year-old man over the 2015 Hatton Gardens safety deposit raid. The heist over the Easter weekend in 2015 was labelled the largest burglary in English legal history, and many of the stolen valuables are still unaccounted for. Mark White is in central London with more on this for us. Hi, Mark. Who is this guy? Do we know?